17 goals by 2030 that aim to end extreme poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change in all countries around the world.
I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna tell them, tell you, tell them, tell everybody. Coming up in 100,000 views. Pandemic to our victory. Right now, for what everybody's been on. Remember the people who put you in power. You don't have to be this way. You just hope for a better day. Tell
Hello, are we live, team? Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final Google Hangout entitled Outreach and Advocacy. We are the youth subcommittee for the 66th UN DPI NGO Conference happening in Yeongju, Korea, the end of this month. So welcome to this Hangout. We hope to have a great discussion that will enlighten you, give a bit more information of what's going on. And I don't need to say much more because this is going to be a heavy discussion. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce myself. I will be the moderator. My name is Maxine Davila. I am the youth representative for the World Association of Former UN Interns and Fellows, WAFUNIF, and I'm the youth representative at the United Nations for them. Today we will have two guest speakers, Ms. Danae and Shanique, and we also have another team member here, Savijit, who I would actually like to introduce first to give us a little bit of information about the conference.
Hello everyone, my name is Sajid Saha. I'm the youth representative from the Olaf Palm Peace Foundation International. So registration for the conference in Korea continues on until May 20th, and the registration link will be below in the description box below. And in addition, we also need youth bloggers for the conference. So the deadline for that will be May 20th, and the PDF of that will also be in the link below.
Did you guys hear that? Calling all youth bloggers, let your friends know, okay? We need you. So keep putting on your resume.
So this is the fourth and last Google Hangouts, and we've already had the Youth conference, and if you haven't been able to attend that, the YouTube link will be on the link below as well. And we have a final event before the conference, which will be the reception at Baha'i International offices in May 24th at 1 p.m. and the invitation for that has gone out as well. And the Eventbrite link will be in the description box below. So everything that you need will be in the box below. And we hope to see you all in Korea.
Great. We also have the co-chair of our youth subcommittee. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, this is Juan again. I'm very happy to be here in the last fourth Google Hangout. We have great speakers today, and I'm just want to welcome everyone. Start submitting your questions, be active and participation. I would like to see everyone that is gonna be in Korea to comment right now, to send your questions so we could get to know you before we go to Korea. So everybody is welcome and enjoy.
Great, thank you. And then we'll just keep moving up on the planning committee scale. We have the co-chair of the actual conference here, Mr. Scott Carlin. Would you please introduce yourself and let us know whatever it is you would like us to know here at the Field Hangout?
First of all, good morning, Maxine, and thank you for the invitation to do this with you. Personally, as a co-chair for the conference, I find that the youth role is going to be incredibly important at the conference. I know the role that many of you have been playing up till now and helping to promote the conference has been invaluable. I know we're going to talk a lot about that today, so I won't say much about that right now as an introduction. But I'm a geographer. I teach for Long Island University in the New York area, and I've spent about 20 years teaching and researching issues related to sustainable development, including energy policy and climate change.
A lot going on there, and we'll talk about that later, how multifaceted sustainable development. So thank you for being here, Professor Scott. It's really a pleasure to be part of this team and an honor to have you speak on our final hangout. And last but definitely not least, I would like to introduce our guest speakers. I would actually like to start with Ms. May. So Ms. Danae Shepard, but we're going to be on a first name basis here because it's a Google Hangout. Have a little bit of fun. She's actually, I would say, a true Renaissance woman for world peace. Where do I start? So she is an attorney. She just happens to be working in real estate law, but she actually has used her legal experience to help indigenous people, youth, elderly people. She still does that work pro bono. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg for her. She's also the founder of Mercy and Love Now. Mercy and Love nonprofit. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about her work there. And let's see what else. We kind of do everything. And we spoke about this before. We're really going to explore all the facets of these speakers and what sustainable development is about, this advocacy and why it's so important.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, rather. As Maxine wonderfully said, my focus is in New York City is law. I practice real estate law, contract law, some trademark law, and I do a few things in international human rights law, and that's my passion, really. I started Mercy and Love in South Africa. I went there when I was a law student, my first year, and I got a chance to go into the townships of South Africa, and I was just so taken aback by, 1 minute you're in Cape Town, and it's like this beautiful cosmopolitan city, has everything you could want, Aston Martin's galore. And just 20 minutes over, you are like in this completely, you're thrown back in time. There's no plumbing, there's no electricity, there's just horrible situations. But, and the kids they're so wonderful, but I feel like there's nothing to sustain them. And I felt like, wow, how can kids like this not have dreams and be playing and be happy and, feel like there's a future for them? So I decided I was going to do something about it. And that's how it started, really. I started going to a night shelter to help out, because a lot of the people there work, but they only make enough to have a roof over their heads, not to provide food for their families and things like that. So yeah, it was pretty amazing and at the same time saddening, but encouraging, because they just keep going. We get discouraged so easily here, but they just keep going. So we basically made a lot of food and we gave out, and I talked to people and found out, what is it that you need? What would be most helpful for you to progress your situation in a place where you can feel good about providing for your family and that your children can go to school? And it was in that way, that's that outreach aspect. You talk to people first and you figure out what they need. And that's what got me thinking, deal with the youth, and you'll get with their parents as well. Talk to them about what it really takes, that it's not just money that is necessary to progress you, but a zeal for education. and that fire that just doesn't burn out. You just keep going, but you apply that to the right area in your life, and that's how we start this advocacy, and through that outreach. And
wow, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I just want to say, yes, how does a person who has all these hats, where does it start? Clearly, we're starting off very passionate. So if you have passions out there, you don't know what to do, or you do think you know and you want to know more, it's a word. It's that. Okay, thank you for that. And we'll definitely get more in depth with the questions. Mr. Shamik Robinson is the director of the College Board, and I would like him to present his professional experiences.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be able to be here and just let folks know that, as we said, with your passions, if you start with what it is that you know, what it is that you dream, what it is that you desire, you can accomplish anything. Mm-hmm. My background is such that I was the first in my family to go and complete college, to go and complete that post-secondary education. And that's something that I've dedicated my professional career into doing. So I've actually worked in the classroom. I've done Teach for America. I've actually worked outside of the classroom at universities such as Rutgers, such as Johns Hopkins University. And currently I work at the College Board. So that's the education nonprofit that has members in all of the 50 states of the United States, but it's also international as well, and it administers those college entrance exams such as the SAT that the kids need to take if they want to go to post-secondary opportunity in the United States of America. And so my one just charge in terms of hoping that we really get into today is really connecting dreams and ideas into actions and outcomes. And students and young people all across the world, it does literally begin with you. Really excited to be here today and have this conversation and answer questions and present insights.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. I am fired up and ready to start this Google Hangout. So the first thing, let me just actually start by, I wonder how aware the audience is of the SDGs. We mostly have our NGO youth reps, so we should be pretty familiar, but Danae and Shamik, are you pretty familiar with the goals and the Agenda 2030?
Not as much. I've been familiar with some of the different international initiatives that are taking place, but I'm not as quite familiar with the SDG 2030.
Oh, the Agenda 2030. Okay, no problem. So just briefly, yes, the Agenda 2030 was signed in September 2015 by all the UN member states. It's not legally binding, but the world leaders did come together, and it's actually a civil society-driven document. All of the feedback, all of the goals, all of the content really came from civil society, and many of the campaigns here, like the United Nations Millennium Campaign and World We Want, United Nations Development Department was behind those programs as well. They really reached the most marginalized all around the world. And they got all this feedback. What do you want? How do you want to see the world be a better place? How would you do it? And they collected this, created the Agenda 2030. The world leaders debated about it for a while and finally signed it in September. So here we have something that many people call a very poetic document, sometimes rhetoric. But I would just say, as a moderator and being in this atmosphere, the last thing my work is from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. is rhetoric. I think all of the experts at the United Nations would agree, so I hope we can touch base on that today. And so basically, in that Agenda 2030, the core is 17 sustainable development goals. They're called global goals, sustainable development goals. These are the goals. They're very colorful, so you'll see them one way or another. And these these goals are here to tackle climate change and poverty, and to also, wow, brain fart. It's a little bit harder to do. Scott, help me out here.
Absolutely. I've got the text right in front of me too, so I got a cheat sheet. So one of the things we do like to say is you don't have to memorize the goals to be passionate about them and to be engaged in them, because you might have one goal that you really want to focus on, and that's great. I mean, that's outstanding. We really encourage that. The issue isn't to kind of memorize 17 goals, but then the hundreds of actions that sit underneath all those 17 goals. So it's a very comprehensive process. There's never in the history of the world really been a process like this ever. Some of the people on the call today may be familiar with the Millennium Development Goals. Those goals focused on the developing world. It was a serious campaign started in the year 2000 to bring up the bottom 25% of the planet and give them a much better foundation in terms of health, education, economics going forward. The Sustainable Development Goals are for everybody, all 7.4 billion of us on the planet. We all can connect into these goals, and it's really meant to create, again, for the first time ever, a single platform for thinking about development in a holistic, comprehensive way. So some of the individual elements in the goals include things like gender equality, eliminating the worst of poverty in the world, clean sanitation, affordable clean energy in the world, decent work along with economic growth, protecting biodiversity on the land, protecting life in the seas, climate change, responsible consumption and production, peace, justice, and strong institutions is SDG number 16. So that's about almost half the goals right there that I just listed. So there's just an immense array of topics that these goals are covering. They're all essential for building a healthy 21st century for humans and the planet.
Yes, absolutely. And amongst those 17 SDGs, as Scott had mentioned, there are 169 targets to make them specific, like what does ending poverty mean? What is quality education? So there are targets that the member states do have to follow in a sense, but the great part is civil society can make them their own. If you're an existing organization, you can adopt the goal and advocate for it on a higher level. The UN is having multiple consultations for civil society to participate. We just had one for the past few weeks for the conference. Anytime you hear about the UN needs your voice, they are serious and it's online. And I bet if you Google UN needs your voice at that time, it'll probably come up. So yes, this is the first time in history. It's very exciting. And I guess that's why we're going to talk about this advocacy and outreach, because this is the final call. What is next? So outreach and advocacy, would either of you like to personally define that? How do you feel?
Well, outreach is, I think, what we kind of already knew, sort of this grassroots. You literally pound the pavement and you go out to those that you can see need help. And I think it's really a dialogue between persons that maybe you would not normally come across or have interaction with on a daily basis, or any kind of regular basis. And it's a reaching out and extending of oneself to get to know the person with the idea or goal in mind that you're going to improve that person's life. And oftentimes, as you see with outreach, you speak to the first person, they can point you to more people, to other people who also need something, and it goes forth from there. So it's really an extending of oneself for the betterment of the person that you're reaching out to, I think.
Thank you for that. And it's always better than just reading the dictionary or having me just fill off the definition. Here is the ultimate outreach person telling you, from the horse's mouth, this is what it is. And obviously the College Board, its greatest mandate is advocacy. Would you like to delve into the definition of that for us, please?
Sure. One of the ways that you can really look at advocacy is when you speak on behalf of someone else. And sometimes that someone else that you're speaking on behalf of is yourself. And so when you think about advocate, from the Latin advocare, to care for, right? And that's going to really talk about you speaking out on behalf of someone else, whether or not they're able to speak for themselves, whether or not you have knowledge that you can lend to them, whether or not the both of you or the multiples of you have a voice that individually you might have less of, or you might not have a voice at all. Advocacy is where we talk about how are you helping others find their voice, use their voice, and really build and organize, literally beat the pavement for getting the issues that you want addressed and realized. And so, like as was mentioned, College Board is really doing that around education, specifically around having those advanced degrees in terms of getting kids across the globe ready for post-secondary, be it a college in the more traditional sense, or a trade, or an apprenticeship, or a certification program, or a work skills program. But any of those items, requires a certain fundamental amount of education. And so College Board is really all about helping to build capacity in that regard and advocating, reaching out and speaking on behalf of others to really establish and organize to get those issues heard, addressed, and made real.
Yes, sir. That is what it is. And as we briefly mentioned, I mean, we talked about earlier the SDGs, we're defining advocacy and outreach. We know the agenda, it was thanks to advocacy and outreach specifically that the Agenda 2030 was created. But now to tie all these elements in, there is a point to all of this and why we're here speaking today. And that's what all this has to do with global citizenship specifically. So if the world is coming together all at once, civil society, Scott, I'd like to ask you the first question here about it. What exactly does advocacy and outreach mean for Agenda 2030, but specifically education for global citizenship from here on out?
So that is a big topic. I'll try to cover that as best I can. I'm hearing a bit of echo. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, great.
So the first thing to understand is that the SDGs reside first and foremost with the member nations. So the governments are responsible for collecting data on the SDGs, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to just get baseline conditions on these 17 SDGs. And the UN coordinates that work with all the governments of the world. So there's a technical element of this, there's a governmental element of this, there's certainly a financial element of this, of making sure that all the governments that of the world have the financial wherewithal to properly allocate money to do that kind of technical work. So the outreach and advocacy part for the NGO community is, I think the NGO world understands very well that if we're going to be successful with these SDGs going forward out to the year 2030, we need to be advocates that this matters to the public. The governments have all kinds of obligations. This is a new obligation on top of all their other obligations. So how do we create some space so that governments actually give this serious attention? They devote the proper staffing to it. That requires the general public knowing about the SDGs, caring about the SDGs, and even speaking out to government representatives and saying, you know, I've heard about this. What is it that you're doing about this issue? So we really do need to communicate to the world, and NGOs are an outstanding vehicle for that, why this is important. And let's not forget the corporate sector here. So NGOs should definitely be reaching out and even partnering with the corporate sector, because the corporate sector has so much leverage. So the conversation with government, of course, would be a little bit different than the conversation with the corporate sector. For each, you want to make the case for why the SDGs matter, why it's in the interests of an elected official to care, why it's in the interests of a corporate official to care about these SDGs. And those are conversations that we can, you know, continue to explore even well past the conclusion of this particular conference that's coming up in Gyeongju. So the global citizenship element is interesting. So far I framed this in the context of governments and nationality and why each government should care about this. But really at the heart of the SDG process is the concept of global citizenship, that we inhabit this planet together, irregardless of what nation we were born to, irregardless of gender, irregardless of our religious background. All of these elements of our personal identity are, of course, incredibly important for daily life in many, many different ways. But there's this other element of our identity that is now becoming much more visible in terms of something that we need to define, the NGO communities need to define and to explain as to why we care about global citizenship. Why do we care in New York about what's happening in the cities of India or in the cities of Kenya? We live on one planet, right? We cannot avoid the logic of the quality of life in one part of the world absolutely spills over to other parts of the world. So purely from a self-interest point of view, global citizenship is really rocketing up the priority chart for people and for governments. There was just a survey done in the BBC. BBC News just reported that global citizenship in 2016 is like the year for sorry, I'm garbling my word. 2016 is the year for global citizenship to kind of break through as this big new theme that people are starting to pay attention to. And education is a major component of that right now, because what we want to see is we want to see schools bringing global citizenship themes more deeply into their curriculum in a variety of different ways, right? It could be a textbook has a chapter on global citizenship, but it can be much more creative than that. It can be the school in India and the school in Kenya partnering together, learning about each other through the use of technology. You know, the internet makes it very easy for students to collaborate now thousands of miles around the world. And part of what we want to do through this conference is really open up the pathways to making all kinds of new creative initiatives happen with respect to global citizenship.
Wow, thank you. And that was actually a great brief on such an elaborate topic, actually. I was just thinking, like, does anybody do pen pals anymore? I'm in youth, but I mean, I think I remember that from like 3rd grade and then never again. But we do have all this technology, and it's perfect for that. And one more, and you know, just to touch upon what you said, like it's the priority of the government to get our voices. We don't have all the, like, the government might not have all the answers, but they're ready and willing to listen to us. So again, it's really important to realize how this is not rhetoric. They're waiting for us to participate, and if we don't, we can kind of let things continue to be the way they are, I guess. Wait, this is our chance. Not a Debbie Downer, just realistic about it.
So one advantage that youth has, in my experience in working with government, is that government really tries to open the doors when youth wants to speak. They really do welcome that voice. And I do want to speak to the cynics out there. It is true that just because the door opens, it doesn't mean change happens immediately. Change can take quite a while to actually materialize, and you should not lose hope about that. So the notion of learning to speak your voice, speaking why something you're passionate about that, this is incredibly important. Passion is infectious in a positive way. It's an inoculation, right? We all carry each other along with our enthusiasm, and even the cynics in Washington or other centers of power around the world, they get swept up in some of that passion as well. Outcomes are always a little bit different than what each of us would like. Compromise is an essential part of politics, but engagement is a requirement to make change happen.
Absolutely. And you know, like you just said, like change is a process, it takes time. The fact that this is education for this change, education is a process in itself. You know, some people think this is too big for me, I'll never, no, take your time. It's okay, we have 15 years to get it right. And by the way, the Agenda 2030 is named for that purpose. We have until 2030 to try to make movement. And there is no need to lose hope, because there were 8 goals before these 17 that many people might not know about. They were called the Millennium Development Goals, and they also had a 15-year deadline. No, they weren't like completely effective, but we learned from them, we're improving on it, and we can continue to do that in the future. So moving forward with that now, I want to kind of get into like the meat of these SDGs with some of the work that both Shamik and Danae do. So with this eclectic educational and professional backgrounds, which SDGs or facets of the Agenda 2030 are you facilitating or solving through your advocacy work from policy, institutional, or legal points of view? And I'm talking about the top level first.
Well, you know, I'm an advocate in my everyday life as an attorney. I go forth, you know, somebody has a legal problem or something's going on, and I go out there and speak on their behalf about, you know, kind of guaranteeing their interests and making sure that the best possible outcome that can happen given the circumstances actually happens. So with Mercy and Love, after the initial outreach and learning that there are so many problems, like child labor was one of the biggest things. Like 5 and 6 year olds are out in the street by themselves selling firewood and fruits and all these different things when they should really be in school. And there's anybody could snatch them up from the side of the road because, you know, the parents aren't there because they're also working, doing something else. And then you have one of the biggest problems I found through my outreach was human trafficking of children and young girls, and boys too. So with my nonprofit, it was bringing them in. You know, the policy of my organization is reaching out to the children and reigniting their dreams and helping them to focus on the thing that will get them out of their poverty situation. Because in their mind, you know, they're assuming they're just going to put their shack up next to their mom and dad's shack, and that's where they're going to live, and their kids are going to do the same thing, and so on and so forth.
And how does that actually, like, so, like, with the SDG specifically, you do this, like, and I actually want to know, like, is it something that you're like, I need to have this human rights purpose and then go from there, or is it just happening and then you can apply it to that in a sense with SDG?
It's been, I established Mercy and Love in 2009, and it really just started out as, I want to help these children. I can see, you know, these problems are there, and I think that I can do something to help them. So it started out very organically. And then as I saw success with certain things and the kids opened up a little bit more, what I did was set up hardline goals that I wanted to meet. And then I started training people because, you know, it became apparent to me that given my other responsibilities, I wasn't going to just be able to live there perpetually. So I started partnering with a Second Chance High School there, where kids who had been, you know, in child labor or whatever have you, could come back and go to school and get an education. So I partnered with them, showing them that it's important not just to give them book studies, but to help them to personalize their education and make it a part of their dream, so that there's a purpose behind why am I getting this piece of paper. So we saw a lot of success in, you know, eradicating poverty because, you know, those children eventually went to school, they got scholarships, and they were able to get out of the slums. We saw obviously education, and they started to do things in their communities to clean up the sanitation issues, because that was like a really big mess in some of the places. And
like water sanitation?
I mean, there was raw sewage running through the streets in the townships. There was like, you know, they had porta potties that were basically outhouses. They really didn't have clean water. Their food source was deplorable. So in speaking to these children and in letting them know where their dignity was and what they really ought to be what they ought to have just by being human beings. It gave them permission to feel like they had rights, and so it's a perpetual thing. It's not just to help these group of children, but to spread it so that they then advocate for the people in their communities, and it can, you know, keep moving forward. It gives them a forward thrust. So.
And that's actually a perfect example for education for global citizenship. I think when people hear that from the UN, they're like, oh my God, one world leader, is it the Pope? I've heard all types of conspiracy theories, but it's more like, you know, no, the Pope actually spoke very loudly about the SDGs, thank you. It's really about being that, you know, empowered person and then spreading that in that way. I mean, it just happens naturally. It happens naturally. Did you get your law degree for that purpose to continue on, or?
Well, I had fallen in love with law somewhere along the line, so I was already in law school when I started this. I had gone to South Africa specifically to deal with constitutional human rights law, because the High Court which is like South Africa's Supreme Court, is very outspoken just because of their history of apartheid and everything for human rights, and they have a very advanced human rights system. So I studied that and human rights law there, and I had already written and published a couple of papers on human rights law as it relates to international business law from the trade standpoint, because as you know, a lot of these trade agreements were very unequal for developing and least developed countries. So a lot of people were suffering on the grassroots level. So I
Would you say that the legal framework actually helped you help that much better?
Absolutely.
I didn't want to say it was obvious because you never know.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
No, it was, because you start to, you advocate better that way, because you start to see the systems of violence, and you're able to address that, and it also gives you an air of authority when you speak, because you can break apart these structures, and you can speak to each one of them. And so it's kind of like, well, you can't pull the wool over my eyes. So maybe that you did for them, but I'm here to speak on their behalf now. Let's get this done.
And that's another perfect example of one of the pillars of the conference, which is formal education for global citizenship, right there. And I love it. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's actually that real.
It is.
And that's, that's speaking from a legal framework. What about the institutional level? Like, you're a director of this educational institution. You have a say of who learns what's next. How has your work so far, the College Board, all touched upon the SDGs?
So I think one big piece is that formal education, in terms of making sure that if you want to be able to have the impact in terms of the policy, the environment, the service, you kind of, as Danae said, you kind of need to have that formal education, so that when you're in the room, you get the respect and you have that authority to speak on confidence in terms of what it is that you're trying to advocate, right? Speak on behalf of someone else for, right? And then outreach, connect with other people to make sure that you guys start to organize together to do that. And so at College Board, that underscores a lot of the work in terms of making sure that the basics of certain reading and certain writing and certain mathematics, in terms of having the standards. So, you take the SAT, and the SAT asks about the critical reading skills that are necessary, and the writing skills that are necessary, and the math skills that are necessary. But in terms of access to the SAT, preparing for the SAT, getting the formalized education that folks need, there's inequity, or there has been inequity in the past, in terms of certain students and certain with certain access to money, with certain access to privilege, were able to better prepare for these SATs and have better education trajectories, so they could become more of the authoritarians that are making these policies that we're now trying to change than in the past. And so over the past several years, the College Board has actually redesigned the SAT. So I don't know if everybody out there in the world knows now, but the SAT is new. It's brand spanking new. It is a new day. It is a new SAT. And the biggest aspect about creating a new standard for education in the United States and across the globe is really increasing transparency, so that multiple students, multiple schools, multiple education organizations can access it. And a big part of that is the use of technology and the use of the internet, and specifically calling out Khan Academy. I don't know how many people on this Google Hangout are familiar with Sal Khan and Khan Academy, but if you are not, I strongly encourage you. You Google, you go online, you look up Khan Academy.
How do you spell Khan?
Khan Academy. And what happens is, literally like taking College Board, just walking College Board out of this conversation, Khan Academy is allowing for global education, global citizenship, and global inclusivity, literally from I'm trying to think of an N-word. I can't think of the N-word, but literally from Nepal to right around this local neighborhood right here. And what's happening is that kids that never had the ability or never had the authority or the capacity or the dignity to be able to go, now through through corporate giving, through NGO sponsorships, literally there are Google Hangout camps and internet camps and hubs being set up around the world, where folks are able to go online, study geometry, study history, study economics, study things like that, and be knowledgeable. And then what happens is, now you bring College Board back, so Khan Academy partners with College Board, so now anybody across the world with access to the internet at any time of day can get SAT readiness, SAT prep, and post-secondary skills. So that's a huge component in terms of globally, right? And then here in New York City, you guys know New York City is a very international city. So we have entire first generation, zero generations of students coming in from countries all over the world, and now they're able to be in New York City and access this, because what we've been helping New York City do, for example, next year, the SAT is going to be given by the city to every 11th grade student across the entire city. That's a huge policy shift that provides equity and access and readiness for college and career that has never happened before in the history of New York City. Unprecedented. That's education outreach and advocacy in process.
I'm impressed. I just had to like go back because I love this stuff. I'm obviously all about the USA. It has to make a stronger presence, obviously, in the international world, not just aiding there, but aiding here. And this is amazing to know that they're already on the ball for SDG 4 here, making this so accessible like that. And I mean, there we have it. SDG 17, SDG 4, SDG 1. This is all happening. I mean, do your programs cost anything? Are they free?
So the Khan Academy partnership to do the Khan Academy piece doesn't cost anything. To create a College Board account and access a good considerable amount of College Board resources doesn't cost anything at all. Now, when it comes actually time to take that standardized test, the SAT, there is a cost factor with that. But if there's a challenge with that, the College Board does make waivers available for students to be able to circumvent and get around the cost of having to take that assessment.
I mean, I remember I'm an immigrant, so we're not even first generation here yet. I'm from South America. I'm from Guyana, and I came here when I was 8. And it was a whole different world for me. I had to acclimate. You know, we didn't have the structural support that we had in my country. So it was coming from a comfortable situation back home to, okay, now we are struggling. What is this new thing? And so I was actually able to get a waiver to take the SATs because, you have some kids, we're all into this new system. We're trying to get on our feet. So that was something that was very instrumental in my being able to push forward my education. But the thing that was very unique was that my parents had already had more than one higher education degree, and they were both professionals from where we were. So going to school was never a question. It was kind of like a 5. So which college are you going to, But I realized that that's not the case in the rest of the world. And the whole thing is that people link education with money over and over again. And one of my highest goals in my nonprofit is to disabuse people of that idea. Because even though I spent a considerable amount of my own money to start my nonprofit, it is going due to the generous donations of people who care. There are so many people out there with money who are just looking for something good to do with it. So, and even without that, I didn't have the money at the time that I started out that first 3-year period, but so many of my kids their minds were just changed because they saw that even if you don't have money, diligence makes up for a lot of it. There's public libraries. There are resources, especially South Africa is a special situation because it's more cosmopolitan, but you can go to the library. They can't stop you from going in there. There are books, do your research, do your homework. Understand that you have a right. That is the most important part. You have a right to it. And where you have a right, you start to find ways and you start to open your mouth and ask, I need this. And then you find out there are a lot of resources out there. And part of the advocacy that I do is to get more resources so that there's a pool of money that is there for people, for the children who want to access this and to go ahead. But making that understanding that education should not be if you feel like it. It's too important to your survival and the moving forward, because there's a forward thrust in the world, like global citizenships. We're connected now. When the Fukushima disaster happened, we're feeling it in the United States here on the coast of California and other places. We can't avoid it. So we have to move forward in an appropriate way that brings up the level of this living standards of everybody. And so that's
absolutely. And I really appreciate you brought the immigrant aspect into this because we're having social issues lately about the refugee crisis and borders and such. I mean, I think we all know, we've all heard this horrible stereotype that immigrants are taking jobs in New York City, and I'm like, well, what are they doing different? And then, if you go to the New York Public Library, there's everything anybody needs in every language to succeed from wherever you are.
Yeah.
I can't even sit here and name anything. Like my handful would be everything. And in every language. And to be honest, some of these immigrants are like, oh, we're here, we're in America. The library is free. And then they find these resources and they learn it and they do it and they don't have anything else to do but focus because that's what they're here for.
Right.
And so it's not a matter of like people like taking anything away. Are we taking advantage of these things, you know? But then there's also aspects where people can't take advantage of that. And I actually want to ask, the last question is a little bit hard. Before I move on, Scott, was there anything you wanted to input here?
I think I know where you're going. I know where you're going with this question. So why don't we move to there?
Okay.
I've loved listening to this conversation. I think there's an incredible wealth of material that people really need to understand just how important these lessons are. And maybe when we're wrapping up, I'll say a couple words then. But I'm really interested in the next question because I think it gets to some really core issues.
Okay, yeah. So basically, what happens when and I want to talk about the differences, whether it's developing country or a developed country. There's kids that want to do better, but they don't even know what's available or that anything is. It's because their parents don't know. Like, how are your outreach methods? Like, how are you getting to all of the kids you need to get to in New York City? And before you answer this, I just want to share a personal story. I personally grew up here in New York City, marginalized myself from the Bronx, New York, moved to Staten Island. My mom thought Staten Island would be a better educational atmosphere for me. And while that may have been the case, I remember being a bully, fighting in school all the time, and public school. And it dawned on me one day that I didn't want this to be my life anymore in 7th grade. And I was going to sign up for Brooklyn Tech or Bronx School of Science or Stuyvesant. These are the specialized schools. I wanted to be with good kids and learning properly. And so I went ahead and took the test cold just to find out that day that there were preparatory classes for 2 years for students just like me, but no one ever told me. And thankfully, I'm still making it here to moderate, but that still hurts me to this day because I'm here for that reason, to help those people that might have that experience. Like, what happened? Basically, go ahead because you have experience in examples.
So one of the pieces that I'll contribute right away, just to build off of what Maxine was saying, was in terms of what I was just talking about, this watershed moment with the SAT in New York City public schools. So I don't know if you guys all know, but like in New York City public schools, there are 500 some odd schools, high schools, so secondary high schools in the city of New York, educating anywhere between 300 to 500,000 students. You pick the day of the week, right? And so one of the biggest challenges that Maxine highlighted is where you live, what school you go to. Even though it's public, even though it's inside of the city of New York, you sometimes get a vastly different education experience that may or may not adequately prepare you for what comes after secondary education, be it college, be it trade, be it apprenticeship, be it careers, right? And so a big significant chunk of that is that students were literally on their own in terms of figuring out the fact that 1, the SAT exam exists. 2, you should take it. 3, you should prepare for it. And 4, how do you do that? Like, all those different things were literally up to individual students and individual homes. And there were lots of situations where people didn't know what they didn't know, and schools weren't telling people, and counselors weren't telling people, and the city wasn't telling people. And so one of the biggest pieces of outreach and advocacy that the College Board has done in collaboration with the New York City Department of Education and the mayor's office is to offer that SAT to every kid. So it literally, here's the situation, right? And this could be, you can look at this sometimes as a plus or sometimes as a minus, but if you look at this overall scenario where kids are going to be now versus where kids were at before. So before, you didn't even know that there was anything such as the SAT and the fact of how it worked, right? And so now you're in a position where if you go to school in New York City, you will have access to the SAT. Now, there are going to be some schools that are going to really do a great job in preparing their kids for that SAT experience, right? And then there's going to be some schools that might not really do a good job of preparing their kids for the SAT, but every kid experiences the SAT. And so for some of those kids, that moment of experiencing the SAT may be their aha moment. Their schools might not have said anything, their counselors might not have said anything, but the fact that they now sit for this experience that they otherwise would never have sat for, the light can go off, because now it's like, oh, I see what this is. I know what this is. Maybe I might not get a good score this time, but I know what it is now. And I know that there's free resources, there's free preparation, there's free tools that I can go and I can get a waiver, right, to take the SAT again, and I can do it on my own. And there are kids in New York City who literally have done that on their own, not necessarily for the SAT, but for example, I don't know if you guys have heard of College Board's AP program.
Yes.
So there's advanced placement where you do college level classes and you do them in the secondary high schools, you do them in the secondary schools. And there's a myth, right? And it's, perpetuated is what it is, that you have to take this AP class, right, in order to be able to take this AP test, right, and get the credit, get the college credit. And that is actually not the truth. You don't have to sit in the class all year. All you have to do is sign up to take the AP test. So I know I can speak to specific students who have had their own diligence, resilience, dignity, self-respect, to say, you know what, I'm not gonna let the fact that my institution for me, I'm not gonna let that get in my way. I'm gonna study on my own. I'm gonna go to the library. I'm gonna go to the internet. I'm gonna go to Google. I'm gonna get this material, and then I'm gonna find an institution that offers the AP, and I'm gonna take it. And I know kids who've done that, and they've passed APs, and they've gotten AP scores, and then colleges will then turn around and look at that, and they will say, that is incredible resilience. That is incredible self-advocacy, and we want you to come to our campus, and we will provide you with scholarships to do that. So that's a really powerful way where you don't let your location and you don't let the situation that's around you block you from wanting to improve yourself, wanting to better yourself, wanting to learn more, wanting to be more and do more. Because the fact of the matter is, if that's the case, none of us would be sitting here today, because she wouldn't have did what she did when she came to America. She wouldn't have did what she did when she came from the Bronx, Staten Island. And me being the first generation college graduate, I wouldn't be the first generation college graduate. I'd be in jail or in the pine box somewhere. So
do you know how encouraging that is from your level, that institutional level? Because that's what happened to me. So I failed this test and I thought, like, I'm just gonna be a failure, a ghetto failure forever. And then I was like, no, I remember these Catholic schoolgirls on the bus, and I ended up going there. And it's true, there's a drive. So nobody prepared me, but I found one little piece of info, and I was like, I have to take that and run. It's so real. He's a real story. I'm a real story. She's a real story. This can be you, and I think I speak for all of us. It's so hard. So get ready for a bumpy ride, but it's
a challenge. It's a challenge. Like, be clear. I have been told by leaders and mentors, I've been told to my face that I have to put in twice as much energy and twice as much effort and spend twice as much time than other people who have access to privilege that I don't have to be able to get to this position where I am today. And so literally the fact that you are watching this Google Hangout means that you have that spark, you have that drive, you have that dignity, you have that respect, you have the ability to do it.
Very encouraging. Thank you so much. You wanted to add something?
Yes, I was going to say that what I've come to realize is that not everybody has that spark innately. There are structures that are set up that keep people from feeling that sense of human dignity, that they're almost silenced. Even if they have it inside of them, the situation around them, the things around them force them to be quiet, to shut down. They just don't feel like they have the ability. So part of what I'm saying, and I've been working with the Harlem Education Center, because I said, hey, if I could do this in South Africa, I'm from New York City. I mean, yes, I'm a neighborhood, but I'm a New Yorker. I've been here for like 20-something years. This is my city, and I see it here in of itself. I went to a public school, and I was in the AP program because I asked to be. In 9th grade, I was around and I was like, you know what, this work's too easy. People are not interested in learning. I want to go into an environment where I can learn and excel. And so I requested that. And so with the Harlem Education Center, I'm getting to the kids that are like 9 years old, because you have to start early. You can't wait until you're in high school to take. It's great that it can happen that way, but we've got to start it earlier. Get that drive going, get that desire, that fire burning from being a child. And then also what I do, part of what my program is at the Harlem Education Center is a program called Why Didn't Anybody Tell Me? Why? And because I found myself saying that over and over again. Why didn't anybody tell me? I had to learn the hard way. And I tell the kids, you do not. I'm here to tell you, you don't. Here's what you need to know. You need to study. Forget the kids who are running around in the street. this is what it is. Look at this life. Look at these people. And I bring people from different walks of life, environments, people who've made mistakes, gone to jail and done something. They come and they talk to the kids. Here is what I've been through. So it's all about exposure. This is that outreach again, exposing the kids at an early age to what it takes to get to this point so that you can start earlier. So there's not that, you get that aha moment younger so that you can do more with your life instead of feeling like, oh, I've wasted so much time. You don't have to feel that way.
And you do it, and the important piece is not only do you do it early, but you do it equitably. Okay,
right.
You do it equitably. So, you know, one of the pieces that College Board's done and other organizations are following suit is around that access and equity piece. Specifically, a big piece of that equity is gender equity, you know? And so there's a whole piece that College Board is doing called Access to Opportunity, where they're really looking at the historically underrepresented students, such as girls, right? Such as immigrants, right? Such as African Americans, right? And so they're doing specific outreach to connect those students to opportunities for success, like girls in STEM, girls who code, things like that. And so you should not be ashamed or feel less of an individual because of your background, be it gender, religion, whatever. The fact that you are breathing, walking, talking, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, and a heart, you deserve to have access to opportunity and access to education.
Absolutely. Or no eyes. If you're blind, it doesn't matter. Thank you.
Yes, it doesn't matter.
As long as you are a human
as long as
being,
you are breathing,
you have dignity that is intrinsic. It cannot be taken away from you, and you have rights, and you deserve to be treated in a specific way, in a dignified way, in a way of respect. And you are entitled to live a decent life. And this is what it's beautiful. I'm an individual. You work for an institution. This is where you see it's important that many facets come together to achieve these goals.
SDG 17.
Exactly, that's where we're tying right back in, because I can outreach, I can give them certain skills, but only the institutions that kind of run things can make it equitable. Because I can fight and protest and do everything, but if the structures, the institutions continue to be exclusive and continue to marginalize, what can I really do? If you can't sit for an exam, it doesn't matter how much you prepare for it. It's worthless. So it's important that these goals become a part of the language of every walk of life, institutions, individuals, grassroots organizations, schools, teachers, whoever. Parents even need to know this. Businesses, because that's where a lot of them the money comes from for the waivers. You know, where do you think it's the
marginalized waivers? Yes, it's so true. Yeah. To sum this question up, it's okay. We're just running a little short on time. I mean, basically, it's the way to reach out the marginalized. You just have to. There's 2 types of people: the ones who don't know and the ones who find out. So the ones who find out, go back for the person who doesn't have that attitude. Don't lose hope if you're not that person. If you're hiding in a corner like, it sounds so great, but it's still not me. Somebody who is that person, go look for those people. She's done it with her experience. She's doing it at an institutional level. And it's happening all across the board. I'm sure in music and movies, we see these underdog stories and such. And Scott, I would like you to pretty much finish this off with how the SDGs tie into that topic. And when you're finished, we're going to actually cut straight into the conference video and then come back for some questions and answers from the audience.
So I'm going to close where I started, which was to bring government back into the process. So these are incredibly inspiring stories. That the notion that the city of New York is going to require every student to take the SAT is a structural change in the nature of education in the city of New York. It really does open doors for thousands more of those aha moments. But the SDGs really are a cascade of transformations that have to happen at the national level around the world, where these kind of micro politics of what New York City is doing are understood by cities around the world. Cities collaborate together, push this through at the national level for national level changes, because we really do need to see transformation at the national level around the world if we're going to succeed in reaching many of these goals, right? We're not going to reach all the goals of the SDGs, but is it realistic to hit 75% of these goals? Is it realistic to hit 80% of these goals? It really depends upon the level of commitment that we all make to insisting that as human beings, we do have basic rights to dignity, and that we do need to engage with our government so that government hears us speaking this way and hears us talking about the SDGs as something that they need to commit to. So how do we tie this all together? We really need to bring government along the ride through the streets of South African cities, the poor elements of the cities, through New York City and the poor elements of the New York City schools. Government needs to see firsthand what's happening there. Government needs to be part of that personal transformation stories of how individuals' lives are being changed because they had that aha moment where they started to clean up the sewer waste that was running through their neighborhood. Because it's really the responsibility of government at the end of the day to pour billions upon billions of dollars into addressing these kinds of problems. So these resources are beyond the pale of what NGOs can do, but NGOs working collectively around the world can kind of light the fire that says we've ignored these things for too long. And people say, okay, well, this is just impossible. We can't possibly do all this work. One of the focal points for the conference coming up in Gyeongju is education, global citizenship education. Education is a leverage point for tackling all of the 17 different SDG goals. And we really want people to understand that education is a national security issue, right? We have all kinds of themes that come across the plate of government at the national security level. Defense, military spending rises to the top. A lot of money in some countries gets allocated to that topic, especially here in the United States. But education deserves that same stature in the 21st century. And we want government to transform in a way that really does meet the peace and security needs of the 21st century. And we can't do it the way we've done it historically. So thank you for letting me listen in. These stories have been fantastic. And I hope your listeners got as much out of it as I did today.
Thank you so much. I mean, you've definitely enhanced this conversation. And like you said, how can you simplify it? I think you've done a great job. So thanks again for your contributions. We just want to play a video of the conference briefly, and then we're going to come back for questions and answers from our audience. Great. We hope you enjoyed that little clip and got excited. We are pretty much ready for this conference. We've been doing all these hangouts and youth events for the past couple months. It's been intense. We are ready for questions and comments from the audience. So Sublegit is going to be our lovely messenger to facilitate this section of the conference.
So hi again, hello again everyone. So our first question is, unfortunately young people are frequently excluded from decision making. How can we ensure that youth are involved in decision making and are provided with spaces to participate in governance alongside of adults?
Well, I would say that first, telling them, letting them know that they have a right to speak because they live in this world too, and they're often the ones that the decisions affect the most in a lot of cases if they have less power. So I think it's very important for parents to begin to make their children a part of that conversation. And in some places they have town hall meetings and these kind of things, but especially in South Africa, they protest for everything. So they don't care if you want to listen or not, they're going to speak. So in a lot of places, I feel like it's up to the municipalities or the religious organizations or the community organizations to provide a space for people to come forward to speak, say what they need to say, and have petitions. Encourage them to write to their Congress people, their state congressmen, to the United States Congress, all these different things. But it starts at home and with the people who have access and interaction with the children to let them know that yes, you have a right, you have a voice, and you should speak up.
And you can also find that at the United Nations as they have their civil society consultation.
I think one piece to add is ask, continue to ask, and ask again. And if you ask and you're told no, and you ask and you're not listened to by one particular individual, you then go to the next individual and the next individual and the next individual. Sometimes you have to play the numbers, and that's where you're able to develop persistence and develop resilience. In New York City specifically, many schools, many community boards, many council groups, right, have a youth position, but a lot of times they're not advertised, they're not communicated, and so guess who gets them? The people who ask. And so you have to ask, and if people tell you no, then you continue to ask, and you ask different people. Don't keep asking the same people. If you keep getting no, you ask different people until you get yes. Eventually, you will get yes. It is how the world has gotten to where it is today, because ultimately someone does say yes.
Never give up, never surrender.
And we talked about how everything is a process, education, growth. Well, so is being resilient. Practice, practice, practice.
I have a good story on that, Maxine. The people of Detroit were finding that their water supply was being shut off by the city. Cities of Detroit for years has been having tremendous fiscal difficulties. They're trying to find ways to be creative, to raise money, but they started to charge a lot more money for water. People couldn't afford it. And so the utility responsible for that would just shut off the water. They'd get no water for their home, for their bathing, for their cooking. And people said, this is crazy. This can't be right. And the government said, well, you have to pay your bills. You're not paying your bills, you don't get water. So the answer that people were getting was no, no, no. And they were persistent. At least some of them were persistent. And they began speaking out here at the United Nations. And so an Office of Human Rights at the United Nations ultimately declared that the people's basic rights were being denied by these actions in the city of Detroit. And it garnered international news, and it forced the city to be a lot more gentle in their policy of how they were dealing with the financial aspects of how to keep a water system afloat. And this was years before the story in Flint broke.
Well, and I didn't really know that part about it. I remember there was a controversy between the plastic water bottles and the filters, but what's the point of a filter if they're not getting water? Thank you for that piece of information there. I just learned something about that.
So advocating for SDGs is relatively easy in non-conflict regions. However, the world that we live in today has a lot of conflict. So how would one advocate for SDGs or in a post-conflict region?
Well, again, back to South Africa, it's not a conflict region, but conflicts do break out frequently because it is one of the more developed countries on the continent. So a lot of workers and migrants just kind of come over the border, and there's a lot of what was called xenophobia, fear of strangers, and so just people would line up every day for labor jobs, and when there started to be a lot of foreigners, I mean, conflicts would break out, especially up in Johannesburg and in Mpumalanga, and it would be day-long riots, and it would just be a lot of unrest. And so what we found was brave souls who work for these nonprofits would go out and kind of talk to people in the quell, the time of the downtime, and get people together to try to start a dialogue. And it was so they kind of got together. They had kind of like a round table, almost like a mediation. And from there, sort of representatives went out and spoke to the government and said, hey, we need to figure this out. We need more areas for refugee camps. We need more access to stuff so that people are not fighting over jobs, which brings revenue to get those basic needs for everyday life. So it's again, it comes to the people who are able for them to actually do something, especially in conflict regions. Oftentimes, advocacy is key in those regions because the people are just too oppressed and caught up in that life or death situation to really say something. So it's those who are able that should step in and do that.
And form alliances with existing groups that are doing this, volunteer for them, see what you can learn. Maybe you have an innovative idea that they can benefit from.
A lot of times it's the Peace Corps that's in there, and religious organizations that go in for relief efforts and to get the wounded out and that kind of thing. And it's those people who we rely on to give the stories, and then we take them further to assist those when you go to the government or other institutions.
Yeah, a different lens to look at that is organized, right? And when you're looking at what do you organize around, specifically in an area of conflict, right? You organize around the least common denominator. And what I mean by least common denominator are like the most basic of needs, because that's where you're going to get most agreement on and less conflict on. And so if you do that outreach, right, and organize around those basic needs, then that lets you kind of start advocating and getting to those next levels. Because the thing at the end of the day is, if you step back and you look at this from a very macro level, people who are oppressed most times outnumber the people who are doing the oppressing, but they don't organize, and that's where they're taking advantage of, because they don't organize. And so we can figure out ways to do that every time there's been a major shift in history, whether it's been in South Africa, whether it's been in Europe, whether it's been in America. It's always been when that oppressed group that outnumbers organizes.
And we do have conflict zones right here in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
the projects,
Yes.
and ghetto areas. And I think most people come from these areas that do make it out. Like I would say, we need to go back, but a lot of times it's like, no, we know what our people are like. They don't want to learn. They don't want to care. But you know what? So what? That's what the changing world is about now. We've done that our whole life, is leave them alone. Now we have to find, like, if that didn't work, what is it going to take now? Try everything.
Organizing is often about changing the story. If the narrative you're drawn to, you're committed to, is a narrative that's leading to conflict, religious conflict, all kinds of other conflicts going on in the world, it's really an indicator that the story itself needs to change. And I think that's really one of the essential pieces we need to come back to in what global citizenship is all about. It's an opportunity to rethink, where do we go wrong in the stories we tell about our personal identities, about the things we love and care about, because we're missing something vital and we're calling someone else our enemy. They're not our enemy. That's just a false narrative we've created. That person on the other side of that line in that other region, they're our brothers and sisters. And we really need to bring that home in educational systems around the world. And this is a major piece of why global citizenship needs to happen. The areas in conflict are the areas that are going to continue to fall further and further behind in terms of development measures. So we have to find ways to reduce levels of conflict, if they're going to be successful with the SDGs.
One of the last things that personally resonates with me, and I think is absolutely key, because oftentimes it starts with one person. Don't be afraid to be that different person. Stand firm if you see something happening. Where I went to high school, it was in the height of the Blood and Crips conflict in New York City. It was a huge problem. People were getting killed and slashed left, right, and center. And at my school, every single day, there was a huge brawl with, like, I mean, scores of members, like 20, 30 gang members on each side, just fighting in, like, the open area. And I remember, I stood firm in my understanding, because I had friends or acquaintances on both sides of the group, and everybody was so scared to associate or to speak to this person or sit with them at lunchtime. And I was like, you know what? I'm not getting caught up in your little crazy game. We're kids, man. And so I would tutor the Crip girl who was a captain, and this Blood. I would help them with their math homework, and each day sit with a different person, and everybody was like, aren't you scared? And you couldn't wear certain colors. I wore blue every day, and some days I wore red. And by standing firm, and more and more of the students in the school started to feel like, well, if Danae could do it, then I can do it. And so you saw more and more people as the time went on, and then it kind of just dissipated, and it became just a nominal thing. And then by the time I was ready to graduate, nobody talked about Bloods and Crips, and there were no more fights. So sometimes it just starts with that one person who has the inclination that something's wrong here, and you just gotta stand firm and don't be intimidated by the situation that seems to be bigger than you.
This is very true, and I like to always say, use your disadvantage to your advantage. Yes, people are gonna disrespect you because you're young or whatever reason they have. Like, it's so important to stand strong. I personally do not have my undergraduate degree yet. Because of the upbringing that I had, but I had to go an alternative method. Informal education has been extremely important for me. In fact, this is a perfect example of my informal education at the United Nations for the past 6 years now, of just really going to the conferences, learning what's going on straight from the horse's mouth, applying it. And I am working on finishing my formal education finally at 30 years old. But in the meantime, what could I do? I'm not a lawyer. I don't work for an institution. What could I do? Well, I have a grassroots. If anyone is interested, hashtag SDG, like the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG NYC. What I did was I created a newsletter, and I related what the UN is doing with the agenda, what the White House is doing for that agenda, and what the New York City Mayor's Office is doing it, so that instead of people saying, oh, that's just the UN or whatever conspiracy theory, now they can see how it's relatable to them, and then they can make decisions of what they're rejecting or accepting. So again, this is all about giving that hope. Whatever level you're at, you can do something. I can't do everything, but I was able to do something that helped me and others, and I hope all of you can come up with whatever innovative ideas. And one last thing to, because you've all added institutions, the World We Want 2030 is actually the civil society platform at the UN. Again, it's the World We Want 2030, and they're the ones who facilitated the e-consultations for this conference, and they're always going to have the consultations. They show what different NGOs are doing for the goals. They were a group, the policy and strategy group that I'm a part of, helped me through strategic alliances get these newsletters and information out in New York City. So again, anybody can use that World We Want platform, and many others that will direct you if the youth are interested.
Sorry. So, as Shakeen had previously brought up with what the College Board is doing with the local government in New York State to provide free SAT tests to New York State students. Oftentimes, people at grassroots level will start initiatives or will bring up a discussion for their own advocacy, steering away from the national government. However, the national government will come back in and change it their way, so then it fits them the most. So what can we do as civil society to avoid such infection?
And this is a loaded question, and we have 5 minutes left, so we can do 2.5 minutes each.
Okay, I go first. Stay involved in the process. Oftentimes the reason that happens is because we're not diligent. We're not, vigilant. You cannot sit there and I mean, I've been naive. I have. but you cannot afford, we've come so far, we've seen the damage where we just kind of sit back on our laurels and let somebody else take care of it. At this point, we have to remain vigilant and we have to be diligent. Yes, it's brow-beating work. Yes, you're going to be exhausted. Yes, there's going to be a lot of tears, sometimes some blood. But this is what has to happen to make sure that we're getting to where we need to be and meeting those milestones. So the clear answer to that is be vigilant. And anytime you see something that is not right or it's not going, yeah, you gotta stand firm, even if it's just you. Open your mouth, say something. Hey, that's not going according to what we said the goal should be. What's going on here? Open it up. Push for transparency at every step. And I mean, even if you have to assign a team to just be watchdog, that's why we have these watchdog organizations. You be the watchdog. Don't think, oh, somebody else is going to do it. You do it. You watch. You be vigilant. Set it up so that when you see something is not going the way it is, you can preempt that and say, hey, we got to get back on track. And if we do that, I think we'll be able to, show the larger organizations or the governments that we're not going to stand for that kind of usurpation of our forward thrust.
And in addition to that, the big piece is not only do you need to stay vigilant, but now we have, like right now, we have Google, we have social media. You need to organize, right? And talk about organizing before. We're going to bring it back. You need to organize and have multiple eyes on the prize. Organize and have multiple eyes on the prize. The reason why the story gets shifted at these, when folks take these local issues and they become national issues and then they turn into something else, is because folks you get so excited that, oh, the government is doing it now, I don't have to worry about it, I'm not looking at it anymore, all the people I was doing it with not looking at it anymore, nobody else is looking at it anymore. 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 2 years down the line, you see it again. That's not what we talked about. That's not what we advocated for. That's not what our outcomes were, because you didn't organize and you didn't keep your eyes on the prize. And so what happens is we have to see it to fruition, right? We're talking about 2030. We organize and we keep our eyes on the prize and we keep people involved in the loop with a say, with a voice to 2030 and even beyond.
Scott, did you want to contribute anything to that?
I'm going to transition a little bit. I'm sure this is an old subject for many of your listeners, but we do have our action agenda document. It's up on the conference website. We took a bunch of comments that we received over the last 6 weeks, and we're drafting that into a new version of the document. But whatever version of the document is up there right now is more than adequate for people to review and to provide additional feedback to. We're going to continue to revise that action document until the very last day of the conference. So we are definitely not too late in the process to hear your voice. Sit down with a group of friends, sit down with whomever you want, sit down alone, it doesn't really matter. But take a look at that document and figure out how you want to contribute. What's your voice? Is there something in there that absolutely has to stay in that document? Is there another thing that absolutely has to come out of that document? Whatever it is that you want to add in terms of your commentary, we really do want to solicit as many voices as possible, because this document is our collective action agenda coming out of this conference. Everybody needs to remember, this is one of the first international conferences by and for the NGO community on the SDGs, right? This is how we want to go ahead and tackle the SDGs. And so it's going to be an incredibly important document, this action agenda, for helping us to define where we're going to go next collectively. And I certainly intend to stay involved once the conference wraps up. I want to continue to move these action agenda items forward from here. So thank you.
And thank you. And that can be found on the DPI NGO website. Throw that on the Google search, and I'm sure it's the first thing that pops up. As we're closing out, we actually have a very special pop-in guest who is the chief and the the new chief of NGO Relations and Advocacy at the UN, Mr. Jeffrey Brez. He's pretty much the master of this.
Hello, here I come in from the side. So I guess I would, I don't think I get to wrap up, but just a few words before you guys wrap up. I guess two things. One is, for the Department of Public Information here at the United Nations, the role of civil society is really taken extremely seriously. We know how important it is. We know that the Sustainable Development Goals will not be achieved without civil society. We know that without civil society, you don't get that ground truth, and without civil society, you're going to leave people behind, just necessarily. You're not going to reach everyone because there's no one on the ground telling you, look, you're missing these pockets of people. And that's one of the important roles of civil society. And in addition to that, the role of youth in sort of that subset, not only as people working at the United Nations, but as part of civil society with NGOs, and the contribution that youth made to our conference is just, I'm sort of overwhelmed by it, because the energy that you bring, and also the credibility and that, you know, sort of boots on the ground attitude of, you know, let's do this, and the point that you were just making about, you know, even if you think you've made progress with your advocacy and it becomes policy, you know, it's not the end of the story. It's just not. You have to stay engaged and make sure that, you know, we actually, you know, all of us have to push our government to stay engaged to make sure that we achieve these sustainable development goals. There's a lot of work, and a lot of people said it's a little complicated to have 17 goals. And the NGOs and others said, well, you know, life is complicated. So we have to be ambitious and we have to work hard. And that's what's happening in this room. If you're watching, thank you for watching, because it shows that you care and that you want to do something a little more than just maybe, I don't know, retweet something. Retweeting is great. As a matter of fact, I'm going to end with just one little ask, right? So if you are watching, go to worldwewant2030.org, find the outcome document. You know, it's posted, the draft is posted in 6 languages. Find your language, tell other people it's available in their languages, if their language is not English, and read it. And after you read it, just tell people that you read it. Right? So I went and I read this document. It's very interesting. Take a look and leave your comments if you can, because we really, really do want to hear what you have to say. And believe me, it's going to be read and taken into account, and may even end up in the document itself. So please engage. We're waiting for you.
The real deal. We have the expert, the leader of UN DPI NGO saying so. Thank you so much for that. As we close out here, before we say thank you to everybody, do you guys have like a one-liner report that you want to leave our audience with?
You are challenged to own your future. We will help you along the way.
Absolutely. It's everybody's responsibility. Stand firm, ask, like Shaquem said, ask, figure out where you can fit in and where you can add your piece, because together, it's together that we do it all. But if we don't do our part, we're not going to make it. Everybody has that one thing that they're supposed to do, that they're brought here to do. Figure out what it is and contribute it, so we get where we need to go.
We're all here to help each other to find that passion too.
Yes, and just like the music video in the beginning, tell everybody that informal education is one of the pillars of the conference. That's advocating and outreach right there. You don't have to be the expert to say these goals exist. They have to do with our human rights, and just know about them until the future. So, Secretary, would you like to thank everybody?
Yeah, sure. So this is our 4th and last Global Hangouts, and we couldn't have done it without the Planning Committee, the National Planning Committee in Korea, the Executive Committee, and of course everyone at DPI NGO. And I also want to personally thank Aishwarya, Kalisha, Ivana, Kritika, Maxine, Mohammed, Nisha, Safira, Shilpa, Tivia, Taylor, Ruth, Jadea, Alpha, and Juan, who are all part of the youth committee and helped bring all of this to you. And so the registration for the conference is still open, and it will end on the 20th. So some of the insider scopes will be that we're going to be having the state-of-the-art youth hub, and we're also planning an intergenerational lunch with the intergenerational committee, which will provide speed networking opportunities, so then the youth are able to get mentorship from people who are experienced in their fields. And definitely participate in the workshops and the different roundtable discussions that are open. And what we want to achieve is that we want to ask the Republic of Korea to bring this forward in the next General Assembly session. So you have a role to play in this, definitely. And the Baha'i International Lunch Reception will be next week. the link for that is in the description box below. And all of the pictures from our different events are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you just use the hashtag UN NGO 2016, you'll be able to find all the pictures. So we also ask you to take pictures and use the hashtag and drop it in. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarajit. Thank you to our speakers once again, and thanks to all of our past speakers from the first Hangout. Please go online, check it out, and let's see what's next for the next 15 years. Thanks to the audience that actually engaged.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
The world leaders will put their signatures to the Global Goals for Sustainable Development. It's a document that commits them to delivering 17 goals by 2030 to end extreme poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change in all countries around the world.
The dance party is behind
Going in and out, been a new generation, we gotta make a change from northeast, west to the south. Okay, give me the south. Your financial, we are all living in the house. Put to do with Zimbabwe, and it's a time you boy, you better rock, I gotta be the south. We gotta make changes. You ready? The African family, we the team on the telly. Now we proud, you steady, we are so rich. We look ready, we get a new place. And we gotta end up it. We gotta fight in it, we will bring you stages. I can't even know what they are, you're black, so I tell you, you don't know. On est seul, on est fort. Si t'es d'accord, on va changer le monde.
news of the United Nations Global Goals for Sustainable Development has caused quite a song and dance that has gone viral. It's called Tell Everybody, a hit single by African artists urging world leaders to stick to their promise to end poverty, to fight inequality, and to tackle climate change by 2030.